Paul Smith of West Bloomfield went into cardiac arrest and his spinal cord was severed in the accident this afternoon. Doctors first reported Smith had died after being taken off life support equipment, but he is alive tonight after being underwater for several minutes before rescue workers pulled him from the wreckage in the Detroit River.
His boat disintegrated, and this is my understanding that Paul Smith, the driver, flew out of the boat and hit the water pretty hard, and the boat basically is in bits and pieces. He is one of the new hot upcoming drivers in the Grand Prix series. Before being a driver in the Grand Prix, he was a driver in the drag boat series, but he moved up and he's been doing extremely well.
Smith, seen here on Thursday in video shot by viewer Ken Searsma, was traveling at about 130 miles per hour during a qualifying race. He was competing in a Grand Prix event for smaller boats. Now, the crafts that compete tomorrow at the Thunderfest are larger and faster, but they have safety features that, as you'll see, are designed to give drivers the best chance if the worst happens.
It was the first heat of Detroit Thunderfest. The time around 11 a.m. An amateur photographer was focused in on 42-year-old veteran racer Paul Smith. As Smith's boat Hydrophobia made the first turn, his Grand Prix was out of proportion and hit.
And when he did, the boat got up sideways and the air caught it, it barrel rolled.
Thousands watched as Smith's boat cracked up. After the accident, around 11:30 a.m., he was immediately transported to Detroit Receiving Hospital by chopper. His racing crew followed with a police escort.
He had a full cardiac arrest. He was resuscitated, but his injuries were such that, you know, he could not sustain life.
But hours later, it was determined Smith was still alive, in critical condition, still breathing with a severed spine. Smith's boat was destroyed, however. This afternoon, his crew tied up what remained of Hydrophobia. Family and friends stood in shock.
He was a great competitor, and you know the sad thing about it, Paul couldn't go to our first race last week because he was doing his son's graduation from high school, and that was Paul. I mean, he loved to come to the race. He said, hey, my kids come first.
Tonight in Paul Smith's West Bloomfield neighborhood, residents remember the man they admired and respected as a neighbor. A man they knew had a deep passion for boat racing.
Paul was a nice guy, and things like that shouldn't happen to people like that.
Many people videotape the accident today and say it's a tragic scene they'll never forget.
I don't like it. Back in '61, I seen Bob Hayworth crash down here at Roost-Tail Turn. '66, Chuck Thompson. 1970, Colonel Warner Gardner. I don't like this at all.
Tonight, Paul Smith's driveway was filled with cars. Friends say he was a great competitor, and family has always come first to him. In West Bloomfield, Mike Amateur, TV2 Eyewitness News.
Paul Smith crashed his hydroplane one other time, and that was in Toledo, Ohio, back in 1988. And tragedy struck on the
hour. Hit that water, it is like hitting concrete. You're going so fast, it just is such an impact. Back to you.
Vanessa, what about tomorrow's Gold Cup race on the river? Will today's tragedy affect that at all?
It won't indirectly, because the water was so rough today. And I should add that when Mr. Smith was racing in the first heat, the water was not that rough. It got rougher later on in the day. Because it did get so rough later on in the day, so many boats were being damaged, they canceled the final heat.
Yesterday died. Tape. As you can see, Paul Smith had just started the first heat of the qualifying rounds when he lost control of the boat. The hydroplane hit a swell, flipped over, and broke apart. The crash severed Smith's spinal cord and trapped him under the boat in the water for several minutes. The 42-year-old died at 8 o'clock this morning. Those who worked with Paul Smith say he loved the sport, but always put his family first. Even though the races went on today, what happened to Paul Smith was in the back of every driver's mind. The concern is not so much for the danger their sport brings, that much is obvious. But many in the pits today say Smith's death could have been prevented. TV2's John Hewitt explains why.
In the pits, it looked like the normal preparations for race day. But the death of Paul Smith had many drivers wondering aloud why it had to happen. On the smaller Grand Prix circuit, open-air boats like this one and the one Smith was driving are much more exposed and dangerous. But with the larger unlimited boats, there is protection in the form of a canopy, which literally seals the driver inside. It is mandatory, and it is a proven lifesaver.
It's been proven. I myself have been involved in 2 flips with this particular boat. Both times I was one of the first ones to our driver. Both times we helped pull him out of the bottom, and other than a little bit of water in his nose, both of them came out without a scratch.
The safety factor is hardly lost on the Grand Prix drivers. The problem is money. Many can't afford the $15,000 to $25,000 it would cost to include a canopy. Still, the Grand Prix circuit is already talking about making it mandatory for new boats, possibly as early as next year. But for now, it remains a matter of cost over safety, a choice of being able to afford to race or not. But all agree with a canopy, Paul Smith would most likely be around today.
Yes, I believe that it may have been prevented, but, you know, I also believe that when God decides that it's your turn, you go. Whatever you've got, you go.
You can't tell everybody what to do all the time, and I wouldn't want it forced on me, but there again, I'll say I won't drive without one.
From the riverfront, John Hewitt, TV2 Eyewitness News.
Today, purses are a prime
being to stop another tragedy from happening.
Scallon was a teacher coordinator owned open.
He loved that. 42-year-old Paul Smith of West Bloomfield Township was pronounced dead at Detroit Receiving Hospital this morning. He suffered cardiac arrest and his spinal cord was severed in the crash yesterday afternoon. He was racing in a qualifying heat when the accident happened. Today, the more than 400,000 race fans at the event observed a moment of silence for Smith. When the special tribute was over, the race and excitement that was so dear to Smith went on as scheduled. Channel 7's Bill Proctor has more on the Thunderfest fun and the issue of whether race fans will have to pay to see the event next year.
They come by the tens of thousands every year. Individuals, families, some staying the night on Belle Isle between Saturday's qualifying heats and the big race day on Sunday. But what if, as early as next year, they had to pay for their free vantage point from the park, from the pier, even from the beach?
I don't think it's right. I think it should just be free to the public, man. It's a good time. Welcome to Detroit.
We wouldn't mind it that much. It's, you know, it keeps the island nice, keeps it pretty. We wouldn't mind paying to come on the island at all.
Between Belle Isle, the beaches, a couple of choice locations along the shoreline, and the bridge, it's clear that more people come to see the weekend event for free than those who pay. But that's what they'd like to change. It is encouraging that not everybody would be opposed to paying a little for those choice-free locations, but not even the race committee that occasionally runs a deficit of several $100,000 wants to take them away.
Every year our costs go up, and we're trying to keep Belle Isle free. There's an awful lot of race fans that go to Belle Isle every year, and they expect to see their race for, you know, for free.
They may resolve the need for more money with fundraisers, but we still may see the need to charge for what has traditionally been free. On the Detroit River, Bill Proctor, Channel 7 Action News, report.
And Channel 7's Dave Llewellyn will be along later in the newscast with more highlights of the Thunderfest.
Crowds and bars have been told to be prepared to close early. In other news this evening, a dangerous sport turned deadly this weekend as tragedy mars the Thunderfest races along the Detroit River. Thousands of race fans couldn't believe their eyes yesterday morning. A hydroplane boat going at more than 100 miles per hour crashed and broke apart, killing its driver. Today, flags flew at half-staff, and racegoers observed a moment of silence to remember racer Paul Smith of West Bloomfield. The winner of the Gold Cup race believes this tragedy could have been prevented had Smith's boat been equipped with safety canopies.
I just wish all of racing would take the safety precautions that Unlimited Racing has with the canopies, because we know they're safe. We know you can have accidents and survive, and I just pray that the rest of the classes make that mandatory.
The 42-year-old Smith was driving the limited class Grand Prix boat when it crashed during qualifying meets. Some drivers wore red and white ribbons at the race today to honor him. This was the first race fatality on the Detroit River in 24 years.